The poor janitor was invited to be humiliated by her mistress. She came to her birthday party with a billionaire CEO in a black limo. 5 years ago, she was the maid who mopped in Thompson's floors. Now, she signs billion-dollar deals in an office that touches the clouds. But when an invitation sealed in gold lands on her desk, Sophia realizes, some debts aren't paid with money, they're settled face to face. Hi friend, before we continue, do not forget to like, share and subscribe to this channel, and also tell us where on this beautiful world you're watching this amazing story from. The invitation arrived in a black silk envelope sealed with gold wax, the kind that whispers luxury, wealth, and cruelty. Sophia Harry turned it over in her hands, her reflection glinting faintly off the golden crest embossed on the front. And Thompson, a knight of opulence. She almost laughed. Even after 5 years, that name still sent a pulse through her chest, not fear anymore, but something colder. Sharper. The memory of humiliation never truly leaves you, it just hardens into purpose. The card shimmered under the morning light streaming into her penthouse office at Harvey Global Enterprises. Through the glass wall behind her, the skyline glittered, towers she had once scrubbed at midnight, their windows catching sunlight like a crown she'd finally earned. She broke the wax seal carefully. Inside was the invitation written in swirling calligraphy. You are cordially invited to celebrate Anne Thompson's 30th birthday. The Glass House Pavilion, Saturday, June 15th. Black tie. Champagne and nostalgia to follow. But it was the handwritten note tucked inside that made Sophia's lips curl. Dear Sophia, I heard you still live in the city. You simply must come, it'll be nostalgic to see you again. Don't worry about the dress code. I'm sure you'll find something appropriate. Anne. The words dripped honey and venom. Sophia could almost hear Anne's mocking voice, the same one that used to echo through the marble corridors of the Thompson estate, cutting through her dignity one insult at a time. She could still see that final night. And standing on the grand staircase, glass of wine in hand, smiling down at her. You'll never rise above the floor you scrub, she'd said, laughing as Sophia picked up the broken glass at her feet. You were born to serve, not to shine. Sophia had believed her, for a while. Until life decided to prove them both wrong. Now, 5 years later, Anne Thompson wanted her at her night of opulence. Not because she missed her, but because some people never outgrow cruelty. They only decorate it. Sophia placed the invitation flat on her glass desk and exhaled slowly. Anne Thompson, she murmured, tasting the name like a challenge. Still collecting trophies, I see. There was a soft knock at the door. Her assistant, Elena, peeked in. Ms. Harry? You asked for the updated sustainability proposal from the Harvey Solar Project. Sophia turned, her posture composed, her tone soft but commanding, the kind that came from years of fighting for every ounce of respect. Thank you, Elena. And, could you find out who sent this by hand? She held up the envelope. Elena's brows lifted. That's the Thompson crest. The same Thompson family that used to? Yes, Sophia said simply. A pause. Do you want me to? No, Sophia interrupted gently. I'll handle this one myself. When Elena left, the room fell silent again, except for the faint hum of the city below. Sophia leaned against her desk and looked out the window. From this height, the streets she used to mop seemed so far away they could have belonged to another lifetime. And maybe they did. 5 years ago, she'd been a janitor working 12-hour shifts, cleaning after people who didn't even see her. 5 years ago, she'd eaten lunch alone in utility closets and counted coins to afford her mother's medicine. 5 years ago, she'd been disposable. Now she was head of sustainability at Harvey Global Enterprises, the youngest in the company's history, overseeing projects worth billions. Her phone buzzed. A message from Tom Harvey himself. Tom Harvey, lunch at 1? We need to review the Green City Initiative. Sophia, of course. I'll bring the data file. Tom Harvey, and the smile. The board listens better when you're smiling. She couldn't help it, a real smile this time. Tom Harvey, billionaire CEO philanthropist, one of the most respected men in the country, and her greatest ally. The world saw him as untouchable, but Sophia knew better. He was the one who'd looked past her uniform and seen her mind. She'd met him 3 years ago, when scaffolding collapsed during a charity event. She had pulled his elderly mother to safety while everyone else screamed. Tom had found her later, her uniform still covered in dust. "You saved my mother," he'd said. "And you fixed the foundation, didn't you? You noticed the structural weakness." That conversation had changed her life. He'd learned she held a degree she'd never been able to use, environmental engineering, buried beneath years of menial work. He'd offered her a chance, not as charity, but as partnership. And she'd taken it. Worked. Learned. Rose. Now, standing in that office overlooking the city, she realized something else, and Thompson didn't know. She still thought Sophia was small. "Let her think it," Sophia whispered. "Let her have one last moment before the truth walks in." She picked up the invitation again and placed it neatly in a drawer. That evening, as the city lights flickered on, Sophia sat at her dining table and called Elena. "Elena, book me a fitting at Versace," she said. "Emerald green. Tailored." "Emerald green," Elena repeated. "That's a power color." Sophia smiled. "It's also Ann Thompson's least favorite. Reminds her of envy." "And the car?" Sophia looked out at the street below, at the stretch of black luxury cars that lined the boulevard. "A limousine. Black. Discreet. And confirm attendance for Mr. Harvey as my guest." There was a pause on the other end. "Tom Harvey? The CEO?" "Yes," Sophia said softly. He insisted. The next morning, Tom stopped by her office before a board meeting. His presence, as always, filled the room like gravity. "I heard about the invitation," he said, slipping his hands into his pockets. Sophia raised an eyebrow. "News travels fast here." He smiled. "I make it my job to know what amuses my executives." She rolled her eyes. "Amusement isn't the word I'd use." He studied her for a long moment. "You plan to go?" "Yes." Tom nodded once, approvingly. "Then I'm driving you. It's time some people learned the difference between humiliation and evolution." Sophia tilted her head. "You enjoy poetic justice, don't you?" "I enjoy truth," Tom replied. "Especially when it's beautifully dressed." For the first time in years, Sophia felt something unfamiliar. Not fear, not anger, but calm anticipation. She wasn't going to Anne's party for revenge. She was going for closure. She wanted Anne to see what happens when the girl she threw away decides to build her own throne. That night, after work, she stood on her balcony overlooking the city. The air was warm, the skyline alive. Below, the streets glowed with life, lights, taxis, dreams. She took a deep breath and whispered into the night. "You told me I'd never rise above the floor I scrubbed, Anne. You were right, I didn't rise above it. I built the whole building instead." The invitation sat on her desk behind her, the gold wax seal broken, its purpose fulfilled. The countdown had begun. And this time, Sophia Harry wasn't walking into a trap. She was walking into a stage. The city lights shimmered far below her balcony as Sophia whispered into the night. "You told me I'd never rise above the floor I scrubbed, Anne. You were right, I didn't rise above it. I built the whole building instead." For a long moment, the wind was her only answer, soft, steady, almost approving. But behind her calm smile, a flicker of memory stirred. Because every rise begins with a fall. And hers had started with the kind of night that never leaves you, no matter how far you climb. The scent of bleach clung to her skin no matter how many times she washed. Her fingers were raw, cracked from scrubbing marble floors that gleamed brighter than her future. The uniform, gray shapeless, with Thompson Estate maintenance stitched over her heart, was still damp from her earlier shift. It was 11:47 p.m., and Sophia Harry was still working. The ballroom was empty now, a wasteland of empty champagne flutes and crushed petals. Sophia moved quietly between the tables, collecting glassware and discarded napkins, the hem of her uniform brushing against her ankles. Outside, the rain began to fall, light at first, then heavier, tapping against the tall windows like impatient fingers. She straightened her aching back and glanced at the grand chandelier above her, 3,000 crystals, imported from Venice. She knew the number because she had polished every single one of them by hand when she was first hired. Every inch of this place was luxury, the kind that blinds those who own it. And at the center of that glittering blindness was Ann Thompson, 24 years old. Heiress to the Thompson Group. Beautiful, cruel, and bored enough to make cruelty her sport. Sophia had been working at the estate for 6 months. It was supposed to be temporary, a way to pay her mother's hospital bills after the stroke. Before this, she'd been an assistant technician in a small construction firm, until the company went under. When no one else would hire her, she'd taken this janitorial job through an agency, promising herself it was only for a few weeks. Those weeks turned into months. And every month, and Thompson seemed to find a new way to remind her of her place. That evening, the staff had been preparing for one of Anne's famous soirees. Sophia had been assigned to clean the main hall, the room and called her stage. She was polishing the marble when Anne's voice sliced through the air like a knife wrapped in perfume. "Careful, Sophia," Anne said, stepping down the staircase, her silk gown whispering over the steps. "You missed a spot." "Oh wait," she smiled coldly, "that's your reflection." Laughter rippled from the other maids who didn't dare defy her. Sophia swallowed her pride and bent lower, scrubbing the invisible spot. "Yes, ma'am," she said softly, and tilted her head. "You know, I admire your commitment. Some people just belong on their knees." The words stung. But Sophia didn't react. She couldn't afford to. Her mother's latest hospital bill was due in 2 days, $3,860. Sophia had exactly $312 in her account. Every hour she worked mattered. Every insult had to be swallowed. As the evening wore on, Anne's party came to life. Glittering guests, jazz music, and champagne that cost more than Sophia's monthly rent. She moved like a ghost between the tables, unseen but essential. At one point, as she cleared a tray, she caught sight of Anne's reflection in the mirror, laughing beside a senator's son, her diamond earrings catching the light. Sophia wondered what it must feel like to exist so effortlessly, to live without fear of bills or sickness or eviction. Then Anne caught her staring. "What are you looking at?" she snapped. Sophia lowered her eyes. "Nothing, ma'am. Just making sure the glasses are cleared." And smirked. "You should try looking up less. It doesn't suit you." By midnight, the guests were drunk, the music louder, the air thick with perfume and ego. Sophia was carrying a tray of wine glasses when someone backed into her, a large man laughing too hard at his own joke. The tray tipped. Red wine splashed across his shoes. For a second, the world froze. The man turned, furious, his laughter gone. And then Anne was there. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she drawled. "Of course it's you." "I'm so sorry, Miss Thompson," Sophia stammered. "It was an accident, Accident." And stepped closer, her voice rising. "Do you realize who you've just spilled wine on? Senator's son, darling. Future investor in my father's company." "I'll clean it immediately," Sophia said quickly, reaching for a towel. And slapped it out of her hand. The towel hit the floor. "You've embarrassed me in front of my guests," she hissed. "You can't even carry a tray without ruining something." Sophia's eyes burned, but she forced her voice to stay steady. "Please, I'll make it right." Anne's smile was slow and venomous. "You can start by getting out." Sophia froze. "Out. Out of my house. Out of my sight." "But my shift is over," Anne snapped. "And so is your employment." The laughter from nearby guests felt like daggers. Sophia stood trembling, wine dripping from her fingers. "Go," Anne said, her voice sharp with delight. "You're fired." Outside, the rain had turned violent. Sophia stumbled out through the servants' gate, her uniform plastered to her skin, her shoes squelching in the mud. The estate loomed behind her, massive, glowing, indifferent. She sat down on the curb by the front gates, shivering. From her pocket, she pulled out a folded paper, her mother's hospital bill. The ink had blurred from the rain, but the numbers were still clear enough to hurt. Her breath came out ragged. She pressed the paper against her chest as tears mixed with rain. "God," she whispered, voice cracking. "What do I do now?" A car sped past, splashing water across her legs. No one stopped. No one ever did. For a long time, she sat there, soaked and silent, listening to the thunder roll over the city. And then something inside her shifted. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something deeper, the sharp edge of realization. She'd been broken enough times to recognize the pattern. Every insult, every door slammed, Every moment on her knees, it was shaping her, burning away the weakness. She stared at the estate one last time, the windows glowing like eyes in the dark. "You'll regret this," she whispered. "Not because I'll destroy you, but because someday, I'll rise so high you won't even see me from where you stand." Lightning split the sky, white, merciless, casting her shadow long across the wet pavement. She rose to her feet slowly, her soaked uniform clinging to her like a shroud she was about to shed. And then she walked, one step then another, away from the Thompson estate, away from everything that had crushed her. Behind her, thunder cracked again, echoing like applause. Sophia found work cleaning office buildings downtown. The pay was less, but it was enough to keep her mother's treatments going. She worked nights, studied days, textbooks borrowed from the library, notes scribbled on napkins during her lunch breaks. When she couldn't afford the bus, she walked 6 miles home in the dark. When her body gave out, she reminded herself, never again. Never again on her knees. Never again beneath someone's laughter. Slowly, she began saving. Not much, a few dollars at a time. Her hands toughened, her mind sharpened. And each night before she slept, she whispered the same vow into the darkness. "I will build something so solid, so real, that no one can ever throw me out again." One evening, about a year later, she stood outside a construction site waiting for a cleaning shift. A safety railing had come loose above the sidewalk. A crowd had gathered, shouting as the scaffold tilted dangerously. An older woman screamed, frozen in place. Without thinking, Sophia ran forward and shoved her out of the way just as the structure came crashing down. The crowd erupted in chaos. Someone called for help. When Sophia opened her eyes, her arm was bleeding, but the older woman was safe. A man in a dark suit knelt beside her. "Are you all right?" he asked. His voice was calm, deep, the kind of voice that carried authority. She blinked, disoriented. "I'm fine," she murmured. "Is she okay?" "She's fine because of you," he said, and only then did she recognize him from news articles. Tom Harvey, CEO of Harvey Global. That night changed everything. He found her again a week later, at the hospital where his mother was recovering. "You're wasted on janitorial work," he told her. "I read your file. You have an engineering degree." It didn't matter to them, she'd said quietly. "Then make it matter to me," he replied. "Come work for me. I'll give you a chance, but you'll have to prove yourself." And she did. The memory faded as the wind stirred her hair on the balcony. Sophia looked down at the glowing streets, remembering the girl she'd been, the one drenched in rain, clutching a hospital bill like a prayer. That girl had burned in the storm. What rose from her ashes wasn't fragile anymore. The city was quiet now. Somewhere far below, a limousine rolled past the corner, black, sleek, gleaming. Sophia smiled faintly. 5 years ago, she'd been thrown out of a mansion. Now she was about to walk back into one, not as a servant, but as a storm. And this time, she wouldn't be cleaning up anyone's mess. She'd be rewriting the story. The rain had long stopped falling on that night outside the Thompson estate, but for Sophia Harry, the storm never truly ended. It simply changed shape, from thunder in the clouds to fire in her chest. She walked away from humiliation with nothing but her mother's hospital bills and the echo of her own vow. "I'll never be on my knees again." And that vow became her compass. Morning began with the shrill buzz of her alarm at 4:30 a.m. The sun hadn't yet touched the skyline, but Sophia was already pulling on her uniform, gray, stiff, and always smelling faintly of ammonia. By 6 o'clock, she was pushing a mop across the lobby floors of a downtown law firm. By noon, she was scrubbing the bathrooms at a local university. And by 8 p.m., when the city lights flickered awake, she logged into her old dented laptop for night classes. Environmental engineering. Her old dream. Her secret life. Few knew that before the Thompson estate, before poverty and shame, Sophia had once been someone else entirely, a scholarship student at the National Institute of Technology. She'd been brilliant then, designing models of green buildings that won regional awards, dreaming of reimagining cities into living, breathing ecosystems. Her professors had called her a mind built for blueprints and change. Until her father's business collapsed. Harry and Sons Construction had been a modest but respected firm, known for honesty and quality work. Until a corrupt developer, one tied to and Thompson's uncle, defaulted on $1 million contract, leaving them bankrupt overnight. Her father's heart couldn't take it. Within a year, he was gone. The mortgage vanished. The cars, the savings, everything followed. Sophia dropped out of university to support her mother, trading textbooks for mops, equations for exhaustion. But no storm lasts forever. Because beneath the ashes of every loss, she buried something that refused to die, the will to rebuild. 5 years later, the hospital room smelled faintly of lavender and disinfectant. Machines beeped softly in rhythm with the shallow breathing of the woman lying on the bed. Sophia held her mother's frail hand, her calloused fingers dwarfed by the tubes and wires. "I'm sorry, Mama," Sophia whispered. "I'm still cleaning floors. I'm trying, I swear I'm trying." Her mother smiled weakly. "You don't have to apologize for working hard." "I wanted to build something," Sophia said through a cracked voice. "I wanted you to see me do something that mattered." Her mother's gaze was calm, her eyes the same shade of warm amber that Sophia saw in the mirror every morning. "You already matter," she said. Then, after a long pause, she added quietly, words that would live in Sophia's bones forever. "You were born to build, not to serve." Those were the last words she ever spoke. The machines slowed, then stopped. Sophia didn't cry that night. She just sat there, in the half-dark, holding her mother's still hand, until dawn painted the sky gray. When she finally stood, something inside her had shifted again. The fire was back. And this time, it burned with purpose. Weeks after the funeral, Sophia found herself at her tiny kitchen table, surrounded by old notebooks and unpaid bills. Her laptop screen glowed weakly as she scrolled through listings for engineering scholarships. Most required degrees she hadn't finished. Some required references she no longer had. She applied anyway. To all of them. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. And then one morning, between her janitorial shifts, she opened an email that made her heart stop. "Congratulations, Ms. Sophia Harry. You have been awarded the Green Future Scholarship for Sustainable Architecture Certification." It wasn't a full ride. But it was enough to give her something she hadn't felt in years. Direction. Her days became a rhythm of exhaustion and determination. By dawn, cleaning offices. By afternoon, online classes. By night, studying until her vision blurred. Her body ached constantly, her hands were perpetually red and rough, but her mind was alive again. She built models from scrap cardboard and recycled materials. She coded energy efficiency simulations on borrowed software. She taught herself design programs from free tutorials and late-night forums. Some nights she slept at her desk, her face resting against pages of handwritten formulas. And then came the rejections. Applications to firms that never replied. Internships that went with more experienced candidates. One CEO who told her bluntly, "People with your background don't fit our image." She didn't argue. She just worked harder. Because Sophia had learned that the world never hands you a seat at the table, you build your own chair. Her world condensed into snapshots. A flickering light bulb above her as she sketches solar panel rooftops on paper grocery bags. Rainwater dripping through her apartment ceiling while she codes a sustainable irrigation model. Her hands shaking as she reads her first acceptance letter for a consulting job, $600 for an eco-friendly cafe project. A pile of rejection letters burning quietly in her sink while she whispers, "One day, you'll remember my name." Every setback fed her hunger. Every small win fueled her courage. Bit by bit, contract by contract, Sophia's name began to circulate among local startups. They said she had an eye for structure and a heart for the planet. She said nothing. She just kept working. It was late summer, one of those sweltering afternoons where the air itself feels heavy. Sophia had taken a part-time cleaning job at a downtown construction site to make extra money between projects. The new Harvey Global building, a cutting-edge green tower that would become the city's architectural crown jewel, was nearing completion. She loved walking its unfinished halls. The smell of steel and sawdust. The promise in the air. It reminded her of what she'd lost, and what she was fighting to reclaim. That afternoon, as she finished mopping near the ground floor, she noticed a commotion outside the scaffolding area. A group of workers were shouting. One pointed upward. Sophia followed their gaze. A loose section of the upper scaffold was shaking violently in the wind. Then she heard a scream. An older woman stood frozen directly beneath the structure, paralyzed by fear. The others shouted for her to move, but she couldn't. The beam above her cracked. Without thinking, Sophia dropped her mop and ran. She reached the woman just as a metal pipe tore loose and crashed toward the ground. With a desperate shove, Sophia pushed her clear, the sound of the impact deafening behind her. The world blurred into chaos. Dust. Shouts. Sirens. When she came to, she was lying on the pavement, blood streaking her arm. The woman she'd saved was weeping beside her, clutching Sophia's hand. "Are you all right?" someone asked, kneeling beside her. A deep, steady voice. When Sophia looked up, she saw a tall man in a dark suit, his expression unreadable but his eyes filled with concern. Tom Harvey. She'd seen his face in newspapers, business journals, and digital billboards. The billionaire CEO. The man who owned half the city's skyline. He took her hand gently. "You just saved my mother's life." Sophia blinked, still dazed. She was in danger. "I couldn't just stand there." "You didn't," he said. His tone carried quiet admiration, something rare and startling. 3 days later, while she was bandaging her arm in her apartment, a knock sounded on her door. When she opened it, Tom Harvey stood there, the same calm presence, his dark eyes scanning the tiny space without judgment. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said. "I tried calling, but your number was disconnected." Her breath caught. "Mr. Harvey." "Tom," he corrected with an easy smile. "You left before I could thank you properly." Sophia shook her head. "You don't owe me anything." "Maybe not," he said. "But I owe myself the chance to meet someone extraordinary." She hesitated, unsure how to respond. He continued, "I read your background. Environmental engineering. Impressive work for someone who calls herself a janitor." Her cheeks flushed. "That's a part of my story I don't talk about much." "Maybe you should," Tom said quietly. "Harvey Global needs minds like yours. We're building a new sustainability division, and I'd like you to help lead it." Sophia stared at him, disbelief and fear warring in her eyes. "You can't be serious." "I don't have the right degree. Or the right connections." He smiled. "You have something better. You have grit. And vision. 2 things you can't buy." She laughed softly, half nervous, half in awe. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a chance," he said. "But you'll have to earn it. Work twice as hard, learn twice as fast. Can you handle that?" Sophia straightened, her voice steady now. "I've been handling worse for years." Tom's smile deepened. "Then welcome to Harvey Global." That night, Sophia stood by her window, looking out over the city skyline, the same skyline she used to clean from the ground floor. In her hands was the official offer letter, embossed with the Harvey Global logo. Head of Sustainability Division, Junior Consultant, Probationary. It wasn't just a title. It was a doorway. Her mother's voice echoed softly in her mind. "You were born to build, not to serve." She whispered back, "I'm building now, Mama." The city lights shimmered like a promise. Tomorrow, she would walk into Harvey Global's glass tower, not as the janitor who once scrubbed its floors, but as the woman who would redefine its future. And though she didn't know it yet, that single act of courage on a construction site would not only rebuild her life. It would set the stage for the reckoning still to come. Because somewhere across the city, and Thompson was planning her 30th birthday, unaware that the girl she'd once thrown into the rain was now the architect of her next humiliation. The morning after Tom Harvey's visit, Sophia Harry woke up in disbelief. The letter on her nightstand wasn't a dream. It was embossed with the silver insignia of Harvey Global Enterprises. Beneath it her name, Sophia Harry, typed in bold print beside a job title she'd never dared to imagine. Head of Sustainability, Junior Consultant, Probationary. But Tom Harvey wasn't a man who offered favors lightly. And Sophia wasn't a woman who accepted them without earning her place. So when he called that afternoon, his voice steady and warm through the phone, she wasn't entirely surprised. "Sophia," he said, "I owe you coffee. The real kind, not the kind served in paper cups under fluorescent lights." She hesitated, smiling despite herself. "You don't need to thank me, Mr. Harvey." "Then let's call it a conversation," he replied. I want to understand the woman who saved my mother's life and refuses to take credit for it. They met at Noir, an understated cafe tucked between two high-rises overlooking the river, the kind of place where powerful men went to talk about things that mattered. Sophia arrived early, wearing her best navy blazer and a calm expression that didn't match her pounding heart. Tom entered moments later, tall and effortlessly composed, his presence commanding without being loud. The staff greeted him by name. He nodded politely to every one of them before sitting across from her. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, just charged. Then Tom smiled. I knew I recognized you from somewhere. Sophia blinked. You did. He leaned forward, elbows resting on the table. 2 years ago. A janitor at my downtown office fixed a burst pipe before it flooded our data servers. The maintenance team was panicking, until a woman in a cleaning uniform climbed under the sink and shut off the valve herself. Sophia laughed, embarrassed. That was me. I thought so, he said, his smile deepening. You left before I could thank you that time too. She shrugged. Just doing my job. Tom shook his head slowly. You don't just do your job, Ms. Harry. You own it. And from what I've read since yesterday, you've done a lot more than that. Over coffee, the conversation moved from small talk to substance. Tom asked questions most executives wouldn't, about design principles, renewable materials, and the future of eco-cities. Sophia answered each one with quiet confidence, her hands moving unconsciously as she explained airflow efficiency and solar grid optimization. Her passion filled the space like sunlight through glass. By the time their cups were empty, Tom was smiling with a faint, unmistakable expression of someone who just discovered something rare. You speak about cities like they're living things, he said. Sophia nodded. They are. Every structure breathes energy, absorbs life. We just forget to listen. There was a long silence. Then Tom said softly, You belong in a room where people do listen. Her brows furrowed. Meaning? Meaning, he continued, I want you at Harvey Global, officially. Not as a janitor or an intern. As part of my sustainability team. Sophia blinked, her breath catching. You already offered me a position. He smiled faintly. That offer was formal. This one's personal. Her first day at Harvey Global was a blur of glass corridors, smart desks, and nervous excitement. The office stood 50 floors above the city, a place she'd once only seen from the sidewalk, bucket in hand. Now, she walked through those polished halls with an ID badge that bore her name beside the company's emblem. Sophia Harry, Junior Sustainability Analyst. The other employees were curious. Some whispered about the new hire who came out of nowhere. But Sophia didn't care. She had no time for gossip, only results. Her first assignment came directly from Tom, evaluating energy efficiency at the company's flagship skyscraper. She stayed late for days, poring over blueprints, running simulations, recalibrating entire systems that hadn't been touched in years. When she presented her findings, the boardroom fell silent. Tom looked at her with something that resembled pride. You reduced our annual overhead by 12% in one proposal. Sophia smiled faintly. It's not magic, Mr. Harvey. It's math and empathy, understanding how buildings and people coexist. That line became a mantra across Harvey Global's sustainability division. Months turned into years. Sophia's career rose quietly, steadily, like dawn over the skyline she helped reshape. Her name began appearing in trade journals, sustainability conferences, and architectural magazines. But she never chased the spotlight, she let her work speak. Tom watched it all unfold from the corner office. He never interfered, never handed her favors, never softened her challenges. But whenever she succeeded, his approval was unspoken and profound. He valued her precision, her refusal to compromise. When other executives boasted about profits, Sophia spoke about impact, how to build cleaner, smarter, more compassionate cities. She doesn't chase power, Tom once told a colleague. She builds it. Their professional bond deepened into a mutual respect that defied labels. Tom became her mentor, and perhaps something more unspoken. He admired the way she carried herself, confident but humble, fierce yet graceful. She admired his integrity, a billionaire who still said thank you to the janitors, who remembered names and birthdays, who refused shortcuts. They often worked late together, poring over project blueprints and sustainability reports, their conversations drifting between technicalities and philosophy. One evening, after hours, she found him staring out at the city lights from the glass wall of his office. "Do you ever get tired of it?" she asked softly. "The constant building, buying, chasing?" He glanced at her, smiling faintly. "Not when I meet people who remind me why I started." Sophia looked out too. "We're all just trying to leave something standing after we're gone." Tom nodded. "You already have." Under Sophia's direction, Harvey Global launched a new initiative, Project Eden, an ambitious plan to retrofit urban spaces with sustainable infrastructure. It became an international success. Investors lined up. Politicians praised it. And Sophia, for the first time, began to appear beside Tom at public events, not as an employee, but as an equal. At press conferences, she spoke with eloquence and conviction, earning headlines like the woman redefining the future of green cities. And Thompson, across town, read those same headlines in her luxury penthouse, her painted smile tightening with envy. Because she remembered the janitor she'd once fired. And now that janitor was reshaping the world. 5 years after that coffee meeting, Sophia's name was etched on frosted glass doors. Sophia Harry, Director of Sustainability, Harvey Global Enterprises. Her office overlooked the city she once cleaned from the ground up. It was a space of quiet elegance, dark oak, green plants, and a single photograph of her mother smiling beneath a half-built bridge. Every morning, she began her day by touching the frame and whispering, "We're still building, Mama." On the afternoon it happened, the invitation, she was reviewing environmental reports for an upcoming global summit. Her assistant, Lila, stepped in carrying a silver envelope on an elegant tray. "It came by courier," Lila said. "Hand-delivered. No return address, but it smells like expensive perfume." Sophia frowned slightly, accepting it. The calligraphy on the envelope was familiar. Too familiar. And Thompson. Her pulse slowed. The name carried echoes, rain, humiliation, and the sting of a voice that once told her she'd never rise above the floor she scrubbed. She unfolded the letter, her eyes scanning the ornate script. "Sophia, I heard you still live in the city. You simply must come to my birthday celebration. It'll be nostalgic to see you again. Don't worry about the dress code, I'm sure you'll find something appropriate. Anne." For a long time, Sophia said nothing. Then, slowly, she smiled. Not cruelly, but knowingly. That evening, as the city dimmed to gold, Tom Harvey stopped by her office. He found her standing by the window, the invitation lying open on her desk. "Something on your mind?" he asked. Sophia turned, her expression unreadable. "An old ghost sent me a letter." He stepped closer, glancing at the embossed stationery. "And Thompson," he murmured, recognizing the name. "The heiress with the luxury developments on the East End?" "The same one who once threw me out into a storm for spilling wine on her guest's shoes," Sophia replied, her tone calm, almost amused. Tom's jaw tightened slightly. "She invited you to her birthday?" Sophia nodded. "Yes. I think she expects me to arrive small, embarrassed, out of place." He studied her quietly, then said with a faint smile, "She's in for a surprise then." "Maybe," Sophia said softly. "I don't want revenge. I just want her to see the truth. That she didn't break me. She built me." Tom walked closer, resting a hand gently on the back of her chair. "You built your wings from the dust she threw at you," he said. "Now fly." Sophia turned to him, her eyes glimmering with gratitude and something deeper. "Will you come with me?" He smiled. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." That night, as Sophia left her office, the city shimmered below her, the same streets where she'd once pushed cleaning carts and carried her mother's hospital bills. She stepped into the black limousine waiting outside, the Harvey Global emblem reflected on its polished door. Through the tinted glass, she could see her reflection, not the janitor and once mocked, but a woman reborn through fire and grace. And in 3 weeks, she would walk into that birthday party, not as the servant, but as the storm. The same storm that had once soaked her in humiliation. Only now, she was the lightning. The morning after Tom Harvey's visit, Sophia Harry woke up in disbelief. The letter on her nightstand wasn't a dream. It was embossed with the silver insignia of Harvey Global Enterprises. Beneath it her name, Sophia Harry, typed in bold print beside a job title she'd never dared to imagine. Head of Sustainability, Junior Consultant, Probationary. But Tom Harvey wasn't a man who offered favors lightly. And Sophia wasn't a woman who accepted them without earning her place. So when he called that afternoon, his voice steady and warm through the phone, she wasn't entirely surprised. "Sophia," he said, "I owe you coffee. The real kind, not the kind served in paper cups under fluorescent lights." She hesitated, smiling despite herself. "You don't need to thank me, Mr. Harvey." "Then let's call it a conversation," he replied. "I want to understand the woman who saved my mother's life and refuses to take credit for it." They met at Noir, an understated cafe tucked between two high-rises overlooking the river, the kind of place where powerful men went to talk about things that mattered. Sophia arrived early, wearing her best navy blazer and a calm expression that didn't match her pounding heart. Tom entered moments later, tall and effortlessly composed, his presence commanding without being loud. The staff greeted him by name. He nodded politely to every one of them before sitting across from her. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, just charged. Then Tom smiled. "I knew I recognized you from somewhere." Sophia blinked. "You did." He leaned forward, elbows resting on the table. 2 years ago. A janitor at my downtown office fixed a burst pipe before it flooded our data servers. The maintenance team was panicking, until a woman in a cleaning uniform climbed under the sink and shut off the valve herself. Sophia laughed, embarrassed. "That was me." "I thought so," he said, his smile deepening. "You left before I could thank you that time too." She shrugged. "Just doing my job." Tom shook his head slowly. "You don't just do your job, Ms. Harry. You own it. And from what I've read since yesterday, you've done a lot more than that." Over coffee, the conversation moved from small talk to substance. Tom asked questions most executives wouldn't, about design principles, renewable materials, and the future of eco-cities. Sophia answered each one with quiet confidence, her hands moving unconsciously as she explained airflow efficiency and solar grid optimization. Her passion filled the space like sunlight through glass. By the time their cups were empty, Tom was smiling with a faint, unmistakable expression of someone who just discovered something rare. "You speak about cities like they're living things," he said. Sophia nodded. "They are. Every structure breathes energy, absorbs life. We just forget to listen." There was a long silence. Then Tom said softly, "You belong in a room where people do listen." Her brows furrowed. "Meaning?" "Meaning," he continued, "I want you at Harvey Global, officially. Not as a janitor or an intern. As part of my sustainability team." Sophia blinked, her breath catching. "You already offered me a position." He smiled faintly. "That offer was formal. This one's personal." Her first day at Harvey Global was a blur of glass corridors, smart desks, and nervous excitement. The office stood 50 floors above the city, a place she'd once only seen from the sidewalk, bucket in hand. Now, she walked through those polished halls with an ID badge that bore her name beside the company's emblem. Sophia Harry, Junior Sustainability Analyst. The other employees were curious. Some whispered about the new hire who came out of nowhere. But Sophia didn't care. She had no time for gossip, only results. Her first assignment came directly from Tom, evaluating energy efficiency at the company's flagship skyscraper. She stayed late for days, poring over blueprints, running simulations, recalibrating entire systems that hadn't been touched in years. When she presented her findings, the boardroom fell silent. Tom looked at her with something that resembled pride. "You reduced our annual overhead by 12% in one proposal." Sophia smiled faintly. "It's not magic, Mr. Harvey. It's math and empathy, understanding how buildings and people coexist." That line became a mantra across Harvey Global's sustainability division. Months turned into years. Sophia's career rose quietly, steadily, like dawn over the skyline she helped reshape. Her name began appearing in trade journals, sustainability conferences, and architectural magazines. But she never chased the spotlight. She let her work speak. Tom watched it all unfold from the corner office. He never interfered, never handed her favors, never softened her challenges. But whenever she succeeded, his approval was unspoken and profound. He valued her precision, her refusal to compromise. When other executives boasted about profits, Sophia spoke about impact, how to build cleaner, smarter, more compassionate cities. She doesn't chase power, Tom once told a colleague. She builds it. Their professional bond deepened into a mutual respect that defied labels. Tom became her mentor, and perhaps something more unspoken. He admired the way she carried herself, confident but humble, fierce yet graceful. She admired his integrity, a billionaire who still said thank you to the janitors, who remembered names and birthdays, who refused shortcuts. They often worked late together, poring over project blueprints and sustainability reports, their conversations drifting between technicalities and philosophy. One evening, after hours, she found him staring out at the city lights from the glass wall of his office. "Do you ever get tired of it?" she asked softly. "The constant building, buying, chasing?" He glanced at her, smiling faintly. "Not when I meet people who remind me why I started." Sophia looked out too. "We're all just trying to leave something standing after we're gone." Tom nodded. "You already have." Under Sophia's direction, Harvey Global launched a new initiative, Project Eden, an ambitious plan to retrofit urban spaces with sustainable infrastructure. It became an international success. Investors lined up. Politicians praised it. And Sophia, for the first time, began to appear beside Tom at public events, not as an employee, but as an equal. At press conferences, she spoke with eloquence and conviction, earning headlines like the woman redefining the future of green cities. And Thompson, across town, read those same headlines in her luxury penthouse, her painted smile tightening with envy. Because she remembered the janitor she'd once fired. And now that janitor was reshaping the world. 5 years after that coffee meeting, Sophia's name was etched on frosted glass doors. Sophia Harry, Director of Sustainability, Harvey Global Enterprises. Her office overlooked the city she once cleaned from the ground up. It was a space of quiet elegance, dark oak, green plants, and a single photograph of her mother smiling beneath a half-built bridge. Every morning, she began her day by touching the frame and whispering, "We're still building, Mama." On the afternoon it happened, the invitation, she was reviewing environmental reports for an upcoming global summit. Her assistant, Lila, stepped in carrying a silver envelope on an elegant tray. "It came by courier," Lila said. "Hand-delivered. No return address, but it smells like expensive perfume." Sophia frowned slightly, accepting it. The calligraphy on the envelope was familiar. Too familiar. And Thompson. Her pulse slowed. The name carried echoes, rain, humiliation, and the sting of a voice that once told her she'd never rise above the floor she scrubbed. She unfolded the letter, her eyes scanning the ornate script. "Sophia, I heard you still live in the city. You simply must come to my birthday celebration. It'll be nostalgic to see you again. Don't worry about the dress code, I'm sure you'll find something appropriate." Anne. For a long time, Sophia said nothing. Then, slowly, she smiled. Not cruelly, but knowingly. That evening, as the city dimmed to gold, Tom Harvey stopped by her office. He found her standing by the window, the invitation lying open on her desk. "Something on your mind?" he asked. Sophia turned, her expression unreadable. "An old ghost sent me a letter." He stepped closer, glancing at the embossed stationery. "And Thompson," he murmured, recognizing the name. "The heiress with the luxury developments on the East End?" "The same one who once threw me out into a storm for spilling wine on her guest's shoes," Sophia replied, her tone calm, almost amused. Tom's jaw tightened slightly. "She invited you to her birthday?" Sophia nodded. "Yes. I think she expects me to arrive small, embarrassed, out of place." He studied her quietly, then said with a faint smile, "She's in for a surprise then." "Maybe," Sophia said softly. "I don't want revenge. I just want her to see the truth. That she didn't break me. She built me." Tom walked closer, resting a hand gently on the back of her chair. "You built your wings from the dust she threw at you," he said. "Now fly." Sophia turned to him, her eyes glimmering with gratitude and something deeper. "Will you come with me?" He smiled. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." That night, as Sophia left her office, The city shimmered below her, the same streets where she'd once pushed cleaning carts and carried her mother's hospital bills. She stepped into the black limousine waiting outside, the Harvey Global emblem reflected on its polished door. Through the tinted glass, she could see her reflection, not the janitor and once mocked, but a woman reborn through fire and grace. And in 3 weeks, she would walk into that birthday party, not as the servant, but as the storm. The same storm that had once soaked her in humiliation. Only now, she was the lightning. The next morning, Sophia woke with the same stillness she'd once felt before presenting her first proposal to the Harvey Global Board, that sharp, quiet calm that came before something life-altering. But this wasn't about business. It was about truth. She didn't need revenge on Thompson. She'd outgrown that language long ago. What she wanted now was revelation, the kind that doesn't scream or beg for acknowledgement, but stands in silence until the world realizes what it overlooked. And so began what she privately named Operation Revelation. By 8 a.m., her assistant Elena was in her office, perched across from her with a notebook full of logistical details and questions. "Elena," Sophia began, her tone deliberate, "I need you to coordinate a few things for an event I'll be attending next month. It's personal." Elena raised an eyebrow. Personal, as in gala personal or scandal waiting to happen personal. "Somewhere in between," Sophia said, the faintest smile playing at her lips. She handed over the invitation. Elena skimmed it once, then twice, and her jaw tightened. "And Thompson," she muttered, practically spitting the name. "The same woman who—" "Yes," Sophia interrupted gently. "The same one." Elena closed the invitation carefully, as though it were contaminated. "She thinks you're still the janitor she used to insult." Sophia leaned back, her expression unreadable but steady. "She thinks I'm coming to beg for acceptance." Elena looked up. "And are you?" Sophia's voice softened, but the power in it was unmistakable. "No. I'm coming to redefine it." From that moment on, everything became precise, measured, a campaign of elegance and restraint. Sophia approached her return not like a guest preparing for a party, but like a strategist preparing for a re-entry into enemy territory. She booked a fitting with Versace under a private name. She scheduled the limousine through Harvey Global's executive fleet. And she requested Tom Harvey's presence, not as her boss, but as her ally. Elena watched the plan unfold with both admiration and mild awe. "This feels like a declaration," she said one afternoon as she confirmed the Versace appointment. "It is," Sophia replied. "Every detail, every choice, it's not about vanity. It's about language. I'm speaking in symbols she understands." "Elaborate." Sophia turned from the window, eyes glinting with calm intelligence. "And speaks the language of status, labels, appearances, exclusivity. I'll speak it fluently, but I'll write my own meaning into every syllable." The Versace atelier on Fifth Avenue was a cathedral of mirrors, silk, and measured whispers. When Sophia stepped inside, the stylists paused, not because she was famous, but because she carried herself like someone who belonged there. A tall woman in black approached. "Ms. Harry? Welcome." Mr. Harvey called ahead. Sophia blinked. "He did." "Yes," the woman smiled. "He requested the best of our private collection. Said this was an occasion worthy of your triumph." Sophia felt a warmth bloom beneath her calm exterior. Tom always knew what to say, and when to say nothing at all. The fitting began with soft fabrics, careful measurements, and the hum of muted luxury. The first dress, crimson satin, was striking but loud. The second, silver silk, elegant but cold. Then the stylist brought out an emerald green gown. The fabric shimmered like liquid glass, catching light and shadow with hypnotic balance. It hugged her form without revealing too much, the neckline graceful, the movement regal. Sophia stepped in front of the mirror. The reflection staring back wasn't the woman who once knelt to scrub marble floors. It was the woman who owned the building now. Elena gasped softly from behind. "Green," she murmured. "The color of rebirth, and envy." Sophia smiled faintly. "Perfect." When she turned to the stylist, her voice was calm, certain. "I'll take it." That evening, Sophia met Tom in his office for their weekly project review, though both knew the agenda had shifted. He was leaning against his desk when she entered, his jacket off, sleeves rolled up, the twilight catching the steel of his watch. "You've been busy," he said, gesturing to the file in her hand labeled Operation Revelation. Sophia smiled, amused. "Word travels fast. I have good sources." She handed him a summary sheet of logistics: the date, venue, transportation, security arrangements. Tom skimmed the first few lines, then stopped at one word. "Versace." "Emerald green," she said, her tone even. He looked up, his eyes glinting with something between admiration and quiet pride. "Bold choice. It's symbolic. Rebirth." She nodded. "And envy." The perfect color to remind her what she tried to bury grew back stronger. Tom's expression softened. "You don't do things halfway, do you?" "I've spent too many years being small," Sophia replied. "I think I've earned my full height." Tom smiled at that, slow and genuine. Then his tone deepened, quieter. "I'm coming with you." Sophia blinked. "You don't have to, Tom. This isn't your fight." "I know," he said simply. "But if she meant to shame you, I'll make sure she regrets ever trying." For a moment, Sophia said nothing. Her throat tightened with emotion she didn't expect, gratitude mixed with something warmer, unnamed. Finally, she whispered, "Thank you." He studied her for a long second. "You don't need me to protect you, Sophia. You already won. I just want to see you claim it." The night before the event, Sophia couldn't sleep. She stood in front of the mirror in her penthouse, the emerald gown laid out on the velvet chaise beside her. The city lights glittered below like constellations she could almost touch. Her mind drifted back to her mother, frail hands on a hospital bed whispering, "You were born to build, not to serve." Sophia whispered the words again now, like a quiet prayer. Her reflection caught her gaze. For the first time, she saw all the versions of herself layered in that mirror: the exhausted janitor, the grieving daughter, the scholar, the architect, the woman forged in fire. Each one looked back, silent but proud. She picked up the emerald gown and held it against her. The fabric felt like strength itself, smooth, cool, alive. The gown wasn't a costume. It was armor. At dawn, the city was hushed beneath golden light. Sophia's schedule was meticulous. Final meeting at Harvey Global, hair and makeup at noon, pickup at 6 sharp. When she arrived at the office, Tom was already there, reviewing sustainability blueprints for their next international project. He looked up as she entered. "Ready for tonight?" "More than ever." He nodded. "I'll have the limo meet you at your building at 7. Black, naturally." Sophia arched an eyebrow. "I assume that wasn't a coincidence." "Not at all. Black absorbs light. Tonight, it should also absorb attention." She chuckled. "Always thinking in physics." He smiled faintly. "Always thinking of balance." At noon, Sophia arrived at the salon. The team treated her not as a client, but as an event. Her hair was swept into a low chignon that gleamed under the light, elegant and unforced. Her makeup was soft, bronze tones, subtle emerald shimmer at the corners of her eyes to echo the gown. When she stood from the chair, the stylist stepped back, visibly moved. "You look like power in human form," the woman whispered. Sophia smiled faintly. "Power doesn't always roar," she said. "Sometimes, it just walks in and changes the room." That evening, moments before the limousine arrived, Sophia stood before her mirror again, the same one she'd once avoided when her uniform smelled of bleach and defeat. Now, her reflection was breathtaking. The emerald gown clung and flowed in perfect harmony, the color making her skin glow against the gold light spilling through her windows. She fastened a pair of diamond earrings, a gift from Tom when she'd closed her first global deal, and slid on simple heels that gleamed under the lamp. Behind her, the skyline stretched endlessly, the city she had cleaned, rebuilt, and now commanded. The doorbell chimed softly, a sign that the limo had arrived. Sophia took one last look at her reflection and smiled. "You don't scrub floors anymore," she whispered to the woman in the mirror. "You walk on marble." She turned, her gown whispering against the polished floor, her heels clicking like punctuation marks of defiance and grace. As she descended to the lobby, the doorman straightened instinctively, not out of duty, but respect. Outside, the black limousine gleamed beneath the city lights, its tinted windows reflecting both past and present. Tom stood waiting beside it, in a tailored black tuxedo, the faintest smile curving his lips when he saw her. "Emerald," he said softly, admiration flickering in his eyes. "Perfect choice." "Let's call it rebirth," she replied. He opened the door for her. "Then tonight, let the world witness it." Sophia stepped into the limousine without looking back. As the car pulled away, the reflection of the skyline shimmered across the window, emerald and gold, as though the city itself bowed in acknowledgement of her return. June 15th. The city glittered like molten glass under the summer night sky, and at its heart, the glasshouse pavilion blazed with light. Chandeliers hung like frozen constellations, throwing fractured brilliance across marble floors. Waiters in crisp white jackets drifted through the sea of couture and diamonds, their trays balanced with flutes of champagne and the quiet hum of wealth. Tonight was Anne Thompson's 30th birthday, and she had made sure no one would forget it. Outside, a valet line of luxury cars curved along the entryway like a runway of polished mirrors. Bentleys, Ferraris, a vintage Rolls-Royce or two. But none of it compared to the pavilion itself, a cathedral of glass and steel perched above the river, every pane reflecting the shimmering skyline. Inside, guests murmured in awe and envy alike. And Thompson stood near the grand staircase, her champagne flute poised like a scepter. She was dazzling in gold, not the soft kind that whispers wealth, but the kind that shouted it from every facet. Her gown clung like liquid metal, reflecting the chandelier light with blinding arrogance. Her diamond necklace, an heirloom passed down from generations of Thompsons, sparkled at her throat, a declaration of lineage and power. "Darling, you've outdone yourself," cooed a socialite as she adjusted her crystal clutch. "I suppose I have," Anne said with practiced modesty, though her smile gleamed sharp as glass. "The event planners said they've never coordinated anything quite on this scale. But then again," she let her eyes sweep the ballroom, "I'm not exactly average." Laughter rippled around her like applause. Behind her, the orchestra struck a lively rhythm. Champagne towers shimmered under golden spotlights, and the scent of peonies and imported orchids perfumed the air. Guests whispered about the rumored cost, nearly $500,000 for one night. "She's practically royalty," one man muttered admiringly. "She's trying to be," his wife corrected softly, eyes flicking to Anne. And heard them and smiled. She liked being talked about. She needed it. But as the night deepened, her laughter came a little too easily. The compliments, the endless toasts, they filled the air but not the quiet space inside her chest. There was a restlessness beneath the glamour, a sense that the spotlight, no matter how bright, couldn't quite burn away something darker. Because somewhere, buried under years of success and champagne, was a memory of a girl she'd once humiliated, a janitor named Sophia Harry. And had only thought of her briefly in recent weeks, but the thought had festered. When she'd found Sophia's name still listed in the city registry, curiosity had twisted into something meaner. A cruel invitation sent for nostalgia. And had almost forgotten about it. Almost. Now, amid the laughter and the glitter, something in her stomach tightened, an echo of guilt disguised as irritation. She brushed it off with another sip of champagne. Sophia wouldn't come. People like her never did. The party was in full bloom when it happened. The orchestra swelled, conversation rose, laughter spilled, until slowly, it all began to falter. From the entrance, a hush started and spread like a ripple across still water. Outside the pavilion's glass walls, headlights cut through the night, two sharp beams slicing across the red carpet. The valets straightened. Cameras, both professional and those of influencers, turned in unison. A black limousine glided to a stop before the main doors. The air seemed to shift. "Who's that?" whispered someone near the bar. "I thought everyone important was already here," another murmured. The driver stepped out first, circling to open the rear door with deliberate ceremony. A long leg, wrapped in emerald silk, appeared, then another. And then she stepped out. Sophia Harry emerged from the limousine like a secret the night had been waiting to tell. The emerald gown flowed around her in liquid motion, its deep green shimmering under the pavilion's golden lights. Her hair was swept into a smooth chignon, a few tendrils loose enough to frame her face, soft, elegant, deliberate. The crowd didn't know her name at first. They just felt her presence, calm, self-assured, magnetic. Then someone whispered, "Is that Sophia Harry?" Another voice, incredulous, "The janitor from the Thompson estate?" But before the murmurs could turn into full sentences, a second figure stepped out from the limousine, tall, sharp-suited, unmistakable. Tom Harvey. Billionaire. Philanthropist. CEO of Harvey Global Enterprises. The kind of man whose presence could turn a gala into a headline. Gasps fluttered through the crowd. Is that? It can't be. Tom Harvey? With her. The valet nearly dropped his clipboard as Tom offered his arm to Sophia, who accepted with quiet ease. Every camera flash became a lightning strike. Inside, the orchestra faltered. Anne's laughter caught in her throat mid-sentence. From her elevated position near the staircase, Anne watched as Sophia and Tom crossed the threshold. Her smile froze. For a heartbeat, she couldn't breathe. It was impossible, absurd, that the woman she'd once screamed at for scuffing a marble tile was walking through her party on the arm of one of the most powerful men in the country. Sophia met her eyes across the glittering room. There was no smugness there, no triumph, only composure. The kind that came from having nothing left to prove. Anne's champagne glass trembled. Who invited her? She hissed at the nearest attendant. You did, Miss Thompson, the girl replied cautiously. Her name's on the master list. Anne's face drained of color. The room was whispering now, waves of murmurs spreading faster than the orchestra could recover. Is she someone important? She's with Tom Harvey. That makes her important enough. Didn't she used to work for Anne? Apparently. Used to clean her floors, they say. The words hung in the air like perfume gone sour. Sophia moved through the room like water, smooth, quiet, unstoppable. Every head turned as she passed. Not just because of her beauty, though she was stunning. It was something deeper, the calm authority of someone who had earned her place through struggle, not inheritance. Tom stayed close, his hand resting lightly against her back, the gesture casual yet unmistakably protective. Are you all right? He murmured under his breath. Sophia's lips curved in a faint smile. Perfectly. They reached the bar, where a waiter instantly appeared with 2 crystal flutes. Tom lifted his glass slightly, voice low enough for only her to hear. Half the city's elite is already calculating how to invite you to dinner next week. Sophia's laugh was soft, almost musical. Then I suppose your presence paid off. He turned toward her fully then, his tone gentler. No, Sophia. You did that. Across the room, Anne's friends clustered around her in confusion and shallow sympathy. Isn't that the woman who used to work for your family? One asked, too intrigued to pretend otherwise. Anne forced a smile. Briefly. We like to give charity opportunities when we can. Laughter, awkward and unsure. But the cracks in Anne's composure were showing. Her eyes darted toward Sophia and Tom, the effortless way he leaned close, the way the crowd subtly shifted to make room for them, the invisible hierarchy rearranging itself in real time. 4 years, and had built her image on perfection. Wealth, status, control. And now in one entrance, Sophia Harry had rewritten the narrative, the help becoming the woman everyone suddenly wanted to know. The orchestra began again, but the air was different now, tighter, charged. Sophia and Tom moved through the crowd with deliberate grace. Every conversation paused as they approached. Every introduction became an opportunity for whispered speculation. Miss Harry, it's an honor, said a city councilman. Your firm's new sustainability initiative is remarkable. Thank you, Sophia replied evenly. We're just trying to build responsibly, something the city's overdue for. Tom smiled faintly at her double-edged phrasing. Another guest, a senator's wife, leaned in. How long have you and Mr. Harvey known each other? Tom answered before Sophia could. Long enough for me to realize she's usually the smartest person in any room. The woman laughed politely, but the admiration in her eyes was real. From across the floor, Anne's expression hardened into something that looked almost like panic. An hour later, as the orchestra swelled into its crescendo and the champagne flowed freely again, Sophia found herself near the balcony overlooking the city. Tom joined her quietly. Are you ready for her? He asked. Sophia didn't turn. She's been ready for this confrontation her entire life. I'll let her come to me. He nodded. She will. And indeed, moments later, the sharp click of stilettos on marble cut through the music. Anne's reflection appeared first in the glass, gold beside emerald, arrogance beside poise. Well, Anne said, her smile brittle as crystal, if it isn't my favorite former employee. I must admit, I didn't expect to see you here. Sophia turned, her face calm, almost kind. I received your invitation. It was hard to miss. Anne's laugh came out too high. Ah yes. I do like to be generous. You've certainly come up in the world, haven't you? Quite the upgrade from mop buckets to millionaires. Tom's jaw tightened, but Sophia laid a hand on his arm. Life has a way of rewarding persistence, she said softly. Some people polish marble. Others build empires. The words landed like a slap wrapped in silk. Anne blinked, her smile faltering for the first time. Before she could recover, the event host appeared beside them, starry-eyed. Mr. Harvey, Ms. Harry, would you care to join the head table? The mayor requested your company. Anne's face went rigid. Sophia inclined her head gracefully. Of course. As she and Tom followed the host toward the glowing center of the ballroom, and stood frozen, her gold gown suddenly feeling heavy and cold. The orchestra played on, but for the first time in her life, and Thompson wasn't the center of the room. Later, as the night drew to a glittering close, Sophia glanced across the ballroom and met Anne's gaze one last time. There was no hatred there, only quiet clarity. And had tried to humiliate her. But instead, she had given Sophia a stage. And the woman who once scrubbed her floors had just walked across it, head held high, the entire city watching. Tom raised his glass beside her. To revelation, he said. Sophia smiled. To rebirth. Outside, the black limousine waited beneath the stars, its reflection gleaming in the pavilion's glass walls, a promise that the night was far from over. Inside the glass ballroom, the air went still. Music faltered mid-note. Conversations broke off mid-laugh. The room, once alive with a hum of luxury, fell into a stunned glittering silence as Sophia Harry and Tom Harvey stepped through the golden doors. Crystal chandeliers bathed them in white light, and for a breathless moment, no one moved. And Thompson, standing at the head table mid-toast, froze. The champagne flute trembled in her manicured fingers, spilling a drop of gold down her wrist. That can't be her, she whispered, her voice barely audible. But it was. Sophia, radiant in emerald silk, her chin lifted, her calm composure sharper than diamonds. And beside her, Tom Harvey, his presence commanding the entire room like a tide that couldn't be resisted. Anne's smile cracked. Sophia stopped at the edge of the ballroom's marble floor, her heels clicking softly against the silence. She met Anne's eyes and offered a polite smile, cool and elegant. Thank you for the invitation, Anne, she said softly, her voice carrying easily through the stunned quiet. It's lovely to see you again. The sound of her name, that name and once spat like an insult, hit the air like a glass breaking. A murmur began to ripple through the guests. Isn't that the janitor and fired? No, look who she's with. She's with Tom Harvey. The whispers multiplied, an electric undercurrent of disbelief. Anne's perfect posture faltered. She tried to recover with a brittle laugh. Well, this is certainly unexpected. You clean up well, Sophia. Sophia's smile didn't waver. I had good practice. You taught me attention to detail. A few guests choked back laughter. Others hid smiles behind their champagne flutes. Tom stepped forward slightly, his expression calm but unmistakably firm, the voice of authority cutting through the tension. Miss Harry, he said, deliberately using her professional title, is one of the brightest executives in my company. She oversees our entire environmental innovation division, one of the most profitable and globally recognized departments at Harvey Global. Gasps flickered through the crowd like sparks. Anne's painted smile froze in place. Executives, she echoed faintly. Tom's tone was polite, but final. Yes. Her leadership is the reason we've achieved carbon-neutral certification 2 years ahead of schedule. A murmur of admiration replaced the whisper of gossip. People who moments ago had been watching for scandal now leaned forward with curiosity, respect. Anne's friends shifted uncomfortably beside her. Their smiles dimmed. The social order, so carefully arranged around her, had begun to tilt. The woman and once called nothing now stood higher, and she didn't have to raise her voice to prove it. Sophia inclined her head slightly, her emerald earrings glinting under the chandeliers. You always did throw beautiful parties, and, she said evenly. It's wonderful to see success treated so extravagantly. It was gracious. It was devastating. And tried to speak, but her throat tightened. The room, her room, no longer belonged to her. Sophia turned toward Tom. "Shall we?" He offered his arm, and she took it, the gesture quiet, intimate, final. Together they walked past the frozen crowd, toward the heart of the ballroom where the music hesitantly resumed. And just like that, the hierarchy shattered. The mistress had become the memory. The janitor had become the standard. Under the chandeliers, surrounded by glass and gold, Sophia Harry stood taller than anyone in the room, not because she demanded power, but because she embodied it. And for the first time in her glittering life, and Thompson had nothing to say. The sound of laughter had returned to the ballroom, but it was different now. It didn't belong to and anymore. The music swelled softly as guests resumed their conversations, all of them casting glances toward the woman in emerald silk who seemed to draw the light itself toward her. And Thompson stood by the champagne tower, her jaw tight, her hand clenched around her glass. Her smile had become a weapon, brittle and desperate. "How adorable," she said loudly, her voice dripping with forced charm. "Our dear Sophia." The janitor turned executive. "What an inspiring little fairy tale. Tell me, do they let you use the same mop at your new job?" The laughter she expected didn't come. Only silence, thick, suffocating. Several guests exchanged uneasy glances. One woman looked down at her glass, another whispered something behind her hand. Even the band faltered, uncertain whether to keep playing. Sophia turned slowly, her expression calm, luminous, even. She didn't need to raise her voice. Every ear was already hers. "And," she said gently, "I'm grateful." The words fell softly, like feathers, but they cut like blades. And blinked, caught off guard. "Grateful." "Yes." Sophia's voice was steady, resonant with quiet strength. "You taught me how not to treat people." A murmur spread through the room, not of laughter this time, but of realization. Sophia continued, her eyes never leaving Anne's. "You once told me I'd never rise above the floor I scrubbed. But you were wrong. The truth is, people don't rise despite the ones who step on them. They rise because of them. Every cruel word you threw at me was a spark, and I built a fire from it." Anne's painted smile slipped. "You," she began, but her voice cracked. Sophia didn't move closer, she didn't need to. The distance between them had already become a chasm. "I used to think strength came from power," Sophia continued softly. "Now I know it comes from grace, from walking through humiliation and never letting it define you." Tom Harvey, standing a step behind her, lifted his glass. His voice carried easily across the ballroom, smooth, commanding. "To resilience," he said. "To the ones who rise without needing permission." The toast hung in the air like a bell. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, slowly, applause began. First from one corner, a quiet clap from an elderly philanthropist who had once donated to Harvey Global's green initiatives. Then from another, a socialite Sophia had met at a conference. Then the room erupted in applause. Not polite applause, admiration. Guests surrounded Sophia, shaking her hand, praising her work, her composure, her brilliance. "Miss Harry, your project on sustainable architecture changed my firm's operations. I've read about your work with Harvey Global, it's revolutionary." And never mentioned you were part of that, Sophia Harry. And stood frozen, her glass trembling in her hand as her carefully curated world began to collapse. Not with a crash, but with a quiet unraveling of social gravity. Her fiancé, Daniel Marks, a venture capitalist with an instinct for power, leaned close, his expression sharp. "You never told me she worked with Harvey Global," he hissed. "Or that she was that Sophia Harry. The one in the Forbes feature last month." Anne's throat went dry. I didn't think it mattered." "It matters now." His tone was ice. "You humiliated her? Publicly? And now she's standing here with Tom Harvey. Do you have any idea how this looks?" The last thing Anne heard before Daniel walked away was the sound of people laughing, not with her, but around her. Sophia, meanwhile, didn't look back. She spoke graciously with the guests who approached her, her poise effortless, her warmth genuine. She carried herself not as someone proving a point, but as someone who no longer needed to. One journalist from the City Herald approached with a respectful smile. "Miss Harry, I'd love to feature your story, from janitor to executive. It's remarkable." Sophia smiled faintly. "If you write it," she said, "make it about possibility, not pity." "Of course," the journalist said softly. Tom stood nearby, watching her, admiration in his gaze, quiet and profound. He leaned toward her as the crowd began to thin. "You handled that beautifully," he murmured. "No anger. Just truth." Sophia glanced at him, her emerald eyes calm. Anger was her language. "I chose not to speak it." He smiled. "That's what makes you extraordinary." Across the room, and watched from the shadows, her golden gown glinting faintly under the chandeliers, her laughter from earlier now a ghost. Around her, the people she once ruled over with charm and intimidation now turned their backs, drawn instead toward Sophia's quiet magnetism. Every compliment that reached Sophia was another thread pulled from Anne's social fabric. By the time the music rose again and the ballroom began to breathe, and Thompson, the heiress, the social queen, had become an afterthought at her own celebration. And Sophia Harry, the woman she had once fired for breathing too loudly, had become the center of every conversation. Later, as the last of the applause faded, Sophia lifted her glass toward Anne, not in triumph but in closure. "Thank you," she said softly, her words for and alone. "You gave me a reason to rise." Then she turned to Tom. "Ready to go?" He nodded, offering his arm. As they walked toward the grand doors, the crowd parted for them, respectful, reverent, awed. And behind them, in the reflection of the ballroom's glass walls, Anne's image shimmered and fractured under the light, like a mirror finally breaking under the weight of its own vanity. The string quartet began to play again, slow and hesitant at first, then fuller as conversation trickled back through the glass ballroom. The night's rhythm tried to recover, but something fundamental had shifted, a new gravity now centered around the woman in emerald silk. Sophia Harry stood near the exit, her posture composed, her presence undeniable. Every step she took radiated the kind of confidence that couldn't be bought, only earned through years of storms, through humiliation that had been refined into grace. Beside her, Tom Harvey adjusted his cufflinks, the faintest trace of pride softening his otherwise stoic demeanor. Together, they looked like the embodiment of balance, the elegance of power meeting the humility of purpose. At the edge of the crowd, and Thompson stood frozen near the balcony, her golden gown glimmering under the chandelier's light. The laughter that had once followed her everywhere had abandoned her. The same guests who used to orbit her now whispered about Sophia Harry, the sustainability visionary, Harvey's right hand, the woman who walked in as if she owned the night. She gripped the railing, staring down through the glass toward the circular driveway below. There, waiting like a shadowed symbol of everything she'd wanted, was the black limousine. The same kind she'd always imagined arriving in someday, as the picture of success, not the echo of defeat. But it wasn't her car waiting. It was Sophia's. The woman she had once dismissed, fired, humiliated. The janitor. Tom placed a gentle hand at the small of Sophia's back as they began to move toward the exit. "Ready to leave?" he asked. Sophia nodded, her gaze sweeping across the ballroom one last time, not in vanity, but in silent acknowledgement. Every chandelier, every crystal reflection, every face that turned to watch her leave felt like the punctuation mark on a story she'd rewritten herself. As they reached the glass doors, Tom hesitated and turned to her. His voice was low, steady. "Did that feel like revenge?" Sophia looked at him, her emerald gown catching the soft glow of the chandeliers. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, her lips curved into a serene smile. "No," she said quietly. "It felt like balance." Her voice carried more power in that whisper than Anne's shouts ever had. Tom studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly, as if recognizing that what she'd achieved tonight went far beyond triumph. It was grace sharpened by truth. The limousine door opened with a muted click. Cameras outside the pavilion began flashing like fireflies in the night. Reporters whispered, trying to capture the image, the billionaire CEO helping the woman once branded a nobody into a black limousine. Sophia paused for a moment at the car door, turning slightly to glance back through the glass. Inside, and still stood motionless on the balcony, pale against the golden light. Their eyes met, two women separated not by wealth or beauty, but by the choices they'd made. Sophia didn't smirk. She didn't gloat. She simply inclined her head in a gesture of calm acknowledgement, a queen recognizing her past before walking away from it forever. Then she stepped into the limousine. As the door closed and the engine purred to life, the city lights reflected across the tinted glass, rippling waves of gold and emerald that danced like memories in motion. Tom leaned back against the seat, watching Sophia. "You know," he said lightly, "that moment when she saw you, I think the entire room forgot how to breathe." Sophia chuckled softly, the tension finally easing from her shoulders. "Let's just say I learned how to make an entrance." He smiled. "No. You learned how to make history." Outside, the glasshouse pavilion grew smaller in the distance. The black limousine glided through the night, its reflection stretching across the wet streets like ink over glass. Inside, Sophia turned her gaze toward the skyline, the glittering towers she had once looked up at from dark sidewalks and forgotten corners of the city. 5 years ago, she'd sat drenched in the rain, holding her mother's hospital bill, swearing she would never be on her knees again. And now she was here, not defined by her pain, but by how she transformed it. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was a murmur meant more for herself than anyone else. "They said I'd never rise above the floor I scrubbed." Tom turned his head toward her. "And now?" Sophia smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the skyline's glow. "I built the building instead." The car rolled through the heart of the city, past glass towers she had helped design, sustainable systems she had engineered, lives she had quietly changed. For the first time in years, Sophia felt something pure and still inside her chest. Not vindication, not victory. Peace. Behind her, at the pavilion, and stood alone on the balcony as the music played on without her. The laughter and chatter of her guests faded into a distant hum, a world she no longer controlled. She watched the limousine disappear into the glittering horizon until even its taillights vanished. In their absence, the truth settled in like cold air. She had invited humiliation, but instead, she had hosted her own reckoning. The limousine turned onto the main boulevard, cutting through the night like a sleek shadow. Inside, Sophia leaned her head back, watching the city pass by in shimmering fragments through the tinted window. Her reflection overlapped with the skyline, a woman who had clawed her way from despair to dignity, from servitude to sovereignty. Tom glanced at her, his tone quiet and reverent. "You really don't know how remarkable you are, do you?" Sophia smiled without looking away from the glass. "Maybe I don't need to. I just know I'm free." Outside, the lights flickered, emerald and gold, the same colors that had followed her all night, the same colors that symbolized everything she'd become. The limousine moved onward, smooth and unhurried, carrying with it the image that would live in the city's gossip columns, social media, and whispered retellings for years. The poor janitor who came to her mistress's party, not to beg, not to fight, but to rise. And rise she did. "They said I'd never rise above the floor I scrubbed. I built the building instead." 1 year later, the glasshouse pavilion was lit again, but this time, not for a birthday party or a display of vanity. It gleamed under a softer kind of light, golden, purposeful, human. Tonight, the same venue that once witnessed humiliation turned into a stage for grace. Banners lined the glass walls with quiet pride. The Harry Foundation, empowering women in the workforce. Inside, guests mingled, business leaders, scholars, and single mothers whose lives had been changed by scholarships, mentorships, and the sustainable housing program Sophia had launched across the city. There were no champagne towers, no orchestras of self-importance. Just laughter, gratitude, and the hum of lives rebuilt. At the center of it all stood Sophia Harry, radiant as ever, though her emerald gown had been replaced with a sleek black dress, timeless, commanding. A symbol not of luxury, but of legacy. She stood on stage, her voice steady, her tone intimate as she addressed the crowd. "A year ago, I walked into this building carrying ghosts from my past. I thought my story was one of survival. But survival is only the beginning. Tonight, we celebrate the stories that start in struggle but end in purpose." Applause followed, warm and genuine. She smiled, not the practiced smile of someone who needed to prove herself, but the unguarded one of someone who had finally arrived home within her own skin. At the front table sat Tom Harvey, as always composed in his tailored suit, watching her with quiet admiration. His company had become the foundation's largest sponsor, though he never sought credit. As Sophia stepped off the stage, he rose and met her halfway, handing her a glass of water instead of champagne. "You did it again," he said softly. "You turned pain into power." Sophia chuckled, shaking her head. "I just built what should have existed a long time ago, opportunity." Tom's gaze softened. "Still, you've changed lives, Sophia. including mine. The air between them held the weight of unspoken understanding, not romance, but something deeper, enduring. A bond forged in respect and shared vision. They turned together as a young woman approached, barely 20, wearing a modest dress and an expression of nervous pride. "Miss Harry," she said quietly, "I just wanted to thank you. I got one of your scholarships. I start my architecture degree this fall." Sophia's eyes brightened. "Architecture? That's wonderful. What's your name?" "Maria Thompson," the girl replied. For a heartbeat, the world stilled. Sophia blinked, the surname slicing through memory like a whisper from another life. "Thompson," she repeated, her tone kind. The girl nodded quickly. "Yes, but no relation to that Thompson family, I promise. My mom says she used to work for them years ago, before she started her cleaning business. She always told me, don't let anyone make you feel small." Sophia smiled gently. "She sounds like a very wise woman." "She is," Maria said, beaming. "She told me to tell you thank you, for proving it's possible." Sophia touched the girl's hand. "Then tell your mother, she was right." As the young woman walked away, Tom glanced at Sophia, reading the flicker of emotion in her eyes. "Full circle," he said quietly. "Exactly," Sophia replied. The past finally learned how to bow to the present. Later that night, when the event ended and guests began to filter out into the cool evening air, Sophia slipped away to the balcony, the same one where, a year ago, and Thompson had stood in silence watching her leave. Now the view looked different, not like something distant and unattainable, but like something she'd built herself, piece by piece. The city below pulsed with light, skyscrapers reflecting the sustainable system she'd helped design, the same streets where she'd once scrubbed floors now powered by solar grids she'd implemented. Tom joined her quietly, standing beside her but not intruding on her stillness. "You know," he said after a moment, "they're already talking about you running for city council." Sophia laughed softly. "Politics isn't my arena." "It doesn't have to be," he said, smiling. "You already lead, just differently." She looked at him, the wind lifting a strand of her hair. "Maybe leadership isn't about power at all. Maybe it's about proof, showing what's possible when someone refuses to stay small." Tom nodded, his eyes on her rather than the skyline. "Then you've already done it." For a moment, they stood in silence, two silhouettes against the horizon, bound not by past wounds but by what they'd built from them. Down below, in a quiet corner of the city, and Thompson sat in a small cafe nursing a cup of coffee gone cold. Her family name had become synonymous with scandal after a leaked video from that infamous birthday party had gone viral, her sneering words immortalized in the court of public opinion. Her inheritance, squandered. Her fiancé, gone. Her so-called friends, vanished. She'd started working at a boutique interior design shop, anonymously, humbly. And though bitterness still flickered in her chest, it had softened into something else, recognition. Every morning, she walked past a billboard featuring the Harry Foundation. Each time she felt that sting of memory, and maybe somewhere deep down, the faintest echo of remorse. Back on the balcony, Sophia turned to leave. Tom offered his arm, and she took it. Together, they walked back toward the softly lit ballroom. Outside, a sleek black limousine waited again, but this time, it didn't feel like a symbol of status. It felt like motion. Continuation. Before stepping inside, Sophia glanced once more at the city, at the world she'd redefined. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the limousine window, not the janitor she once was, not even the executive she'd become, but something larger. A builder. A believer. A legacy. As the car pulled away, she whispered softly, a promise not just to herself, but to every woman who had ever been told she was nothing. "We don't rise to prove them wrong. We rise to prove ourselves right." And the city lights, glinting emerald and gold, seemed to whisper back, "You did." They said I'd never rise above the floor I scrubbed. I built the world that stands on it. Thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments section what you learned from the story.